The Man Who Sold the Sea. She was leaving the fish market with her arms full of bags when she saw him, barefoot, sunburnt to leather, dragging a torn net along the pier, picking cigarette butts and bottle caps from the sand to trade for food. 15 years earlier, Captain Mateo had disappeared with his fishing boat and every cent they owned, leaving only a note. "The sea is kinder than what's coming. Forgive me." She had cursed him every dawn since, raising their daughter alone, scrubbing floors, believing he'd run off with a younger woman and their savings. Now his once proud shoulders were bent like broken masts, his eyes empty of the ocean he loved. When their gazes locked, he dropped the net and tried to flee into the waves. She caught his wrist, thin as rope, and demanded the truth. He collapsed on the wet sand and confessed. The port syndicate had used his boats for smuggling. When he refused to continue, they showed him photos of her and their little girl at the school route. "One more trip, or one less family," they said. So he scuttled his own boat far out, faked his death, transferred everything to her name so they'd believe he paid with ruin, and lived the rest of his life as a beach ghost so the killers would never look back at his wife and daughter. He died of fever 3 weeks later in her tiny apartment, whispering that the sea had finally given him back to her. She scattered his ashes at dawn, sold the old boat license the syndicate never knew still existed, and opened a small seafood stall she named Mateo's Sacrifice. Every morning, she watches the sunrise and no longer hates the man who loved her enough to drown himself for her. The Teacher Without a Name. I found him sleeping under the highway bridge, surrounded by cardboard and chalk dust, writing math problems on the concrete with a piece of brick, still teaching invisible students. 30 years ago, Professor Daniel Rivera had been the most brilliant mind in the university, published, admired, my husband. Then one morning, he was gone. The dean handed me a resignation letter in his handwriting. Within months, our accounts were frozen, our house seized, scandalous accusations of embezzlement everywhere. I became a pariah, lost my own teaching post, survived on substitute gigs, and taught myself to despise him. Now, his beard was white, his glasses cracked, his coat a patchwork of charity. When he saw me, he tried to hide the chalk, like a child caught stealing. "Clara," he whispered, and the chalk snapped in his hand. That night, in a cheap diner, he told me everything. A powerful rector and his politician friends had cooked the university books for decades. Daniel discovered it. They gave him a choice: sign the false audits, or his wife, me, would have a tragic lab accident involving acid and fire. He chose to become the thief everyone believed, transferred every asset to fabricated debts, disappeared, and spent the rest of his life homeless so no one would ever connect him to me again. He died of fever before the trial. I took the evidence he had copied by hand on thousands of cardboard pieces and brought the entire board down. At the commemoration, they wanted to name the new mathematics building after him. I refused. I had it named the Anonymous Professor, because that is the name he chose to save me. The Pianist of the Subway. She recognized him by the way he played. Those same delicate arpeggios he once performed in concert halls, now on a broken keyboard powered by a car battery in the metro tunnel. Passers-by tossed coins, he never looked up. 25 years earlier, world-renowned pianist Alexander had vanished after a sold-out tour, leaving her pregnant and bankrupt, accused of having fled with the orchestra's funds. She miscarried from stress, cleaned offices at night, and learned to loathe the sound of piano. When she finally approached, he stopped mid-Chopin, hands trembling. "Don't come closer, Elise, please." In the dim tunnel, he confessed. The tour had been a front for laundering cartel money. When he threatened to go to the police, they showed him real-time video of her sleeping in their apartment, a red laser dot dancing on her forehead. He faked a breakdown, disappeared, donated every cent to debts, and lived underground, literally, so the cartel would believe the trail died with him. He had kept playing only because music was the last shred of himself he was allowed to keep. She brought him home, nursed him, recorded his final concert on a borrowed piano, and sent the video, plus his hidden ledgers, to every major news outlet the day he died of heart failure. The cartel fell. The underground tunnel where he played now has a bronze plaque that says, "Here played Alexander Laurent," who silenced himself so the woman he loved could live in light. The watchmaker with no time. She saw him in the flea market, hunched over a tiny table, repairing watches with shaking hands, clothes ragged, eyes magnified behind cracked lenses. 40 years ago, master watchmaker Samuel had closed his famous shop overnight, emptied the joint account, and vanished, leaving a note. "Some mechanisms cannot be fixed. Let me go." She was left with debts, a teenage son who hated her father, and a lifetime of bitterness. Now Samuel's fingers were gnarled, his tools held together with tape. When she spoke his name, he dropped a spring that rolled away like a tear. That evening in a shelter, he explained. A crime family used his precision skills to build untraceable timers for bombs. When he refused the last job, they put her photo and their son's school schedule on his workbench with a practice device. He chose to become the thief who supposedly sold everything and fled, lived homeless, fixed watches for pennies, and destroyed his own hands rather than ever make something that could hurt them. He died months later, clutching the first watch he ever gave her, still running perfectly. She used the insurance money no one knew existed, hidden inside watch cases, to reopen the shop under their son's name. The sign reads, "Samuel and Son. We repair time for those who lost it." The gardener of weeds. She found him kneeling at an abandoned lot, planting wildflowers among the trash, clothes patched with leaves, face burned by sun and sorrow. 28 years earlier, award-winning landscape architect Julian had disappeared after winning the contract for the city's largest park, leaving her drowning in debt and scandal, accused of fraud together with him. She lost the nursery, the house, everything but hatred. Now he tended a jungle of weeds as if it were Versailles. When she called his name, he froze, spade in hand. In the twilight, among the thistles, he confessed. The park contract was a massive money laundering scheme for the mayor's office. When Julian found the false invoices, they threatened to landscape her, bury her alive under the future rose garden. So he took the blame, vanished, gave away every plant, every cent, and spent the rest of his life making beauty grow in places no one wanted to look, so the people who destroyed them would never think to search for her again. He died the following spring, seated among the wildflowers he had planted. They bloomed brighter than ever. She fought the city and turned that abandoned lot into the official Julian Morrow Memorial Wild Garden. Entry is free. Every plaque reads the same line he whispered before dying. "I turned myself into a weed so you could remain a flower." All 5 carry the same knife twist. The person we hated most for destroying us actually loved us so fiercely they chose slow death over letting us die quickly.